Hey, what's going on, Kussi? It's nice to have a conversation on a public setting and share with the world some of our experiences as therapists and tips that people could implement into their lives.
Yeah, Yossi, thank you for making this happen. We spoke about this for a while because we always have great conversations about ourselves, about just supporting each other through this new calling that we took.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and so many times in our conversations, you would say, "Wow, I wish we recorded that," or "I wish that we put that on a podcast." So we decided, hey, let's have these conversations and record them, and we feel like a lot of people would find value in them.
Yeah, yeah. So it's quite interesting how we each have our journeys, how we ended up here, and that'll be, I guess, for another podcast to talk about each of our stories, how we became therapists. But for today, I want to actually ask a question that I get asked often, and I'm sure therapists in general get this question asked often, and that is, when does one seek therapy? Let's start with that. Kussi, if you could share or give us some insight. When is a time where a person says, okay, it's time to go to therapy?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's so many different, obviously everybody's coming to therapy. There probably is a lot of similarities, and the way I'm thinking about it now, you could have a proactive and reactive um, reason or the timing of showing up for therapy. So often what happens is people are in a stuck place. They're going through something difficult. So I would call that more the second, as a reactive. There's a big challenge going on, whether it's, us as marriage and family therapists, whether it's relational or in there's a life transition. There's a new child in the family, a marriage, a new job, a new career. So people are going through, and something has happened. They're in struggle. There's conflict, and also a person, an individual. There's someone's in persistent anxiety, or feeling down or depressed, or kind of not being able to get a handle on their emotions and to regulate and to really move forward in something that's plaguing them. So often at that point, someone is saying, okay, I'm feeling quite stuck. I
Right.
think I'm going to reach out for help. So that's kind of where I would put, like, and that's most often, but maybe they'll call it a unicorn. What sometimes people are doing proactive, saying, well, I know this is coming up. For example, I don't have this a lot, but I had a couple come in for premarital counseling. So nothing actually
Hmm.
happened yet, but they knew that this is a new relationship that's starting. So let's start this out properly. Let's get skills ahead of time. So
Right.
that's really cool when people kind of do a proactive where it's like, I know I'm going into this new position. Things have come up for me before. I'm having a child. I'm starting this new career. Nothing is plaguing me yet. I'm not stuck, but let me level up. Like, let me put myself in a position that I'm getting clarity. I'm putting myself in a position to get more skills, or just getting help and support to go into this new space. So that's
Right.
kind of
Right. So, and
um,
I think Patrick Carnes talks about this with the idea of first degree order of change and second degree order of change. Where first degree order of change is basically the first thing you mentioned, where the therapist and the client work on behavioral change or what is overt. And so let's say if it's addiction, so the idea would be, how do we stop the addiction, or how do we stop the anxiety? Um, how do we get someone out of a state of depression? That's first degree order of change. And then the second degree order of change is really the underlying reasoning or moment that the person got to the bad habits. So second degree order of change is really where we're being proactive and getting to the root cause of why this bad behavior started in the first place.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. So the symptom relief versus really addressing what's going on. And I love, especially you mentioned Patrick Carson addiction. That's something I think become people are becoming much more aware of. That often we emphasize the drinking or the sex addiction or the gambling, the behavior. It's like, how do we stop that? So yes, that needs to be stopped, but that's not the issue. As we know, that's it's usually it's a coping mechanism. It's I mean, there's different models of it, but in that context, there's it's the medicine. There's a deeper issue. So as you're referring to, a second order change would be, what is it medicine for? Like what's this behavior really coming to provide relief for? What's the
Right.
underlying angst or discomfort or unworthiness or whatever's there, shame? These are a lot of big topics, but that's really the second order change, as you mentioned.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that a lot of the clients that I'm working with are dealing with cognitive distortion.
Mm.
So, like black and white thinking. So, like, once we move away from the behavior, the negative behavior, or the anger, or the relational issues, the relational conflict. So, what's really going on in the person? And I guess, from a cognitive perspective, I find that some people that come to therapy, it's like all or nothing thinking, black and white thinking, or like personalization, where they think or imagine that everything that's going on is their fault. So, like, what is in your control, what is not in your control. So doing that sort of work. What do you find in your work with clients?
So I mean, for me, I find a lot of, like you were mentioning, like from a cognitive perspective, what I've seen over, my couple of years of doing this and the models that I've learned is there's so much overlap, but it's where do you enter from, right? A lot of these, there's definitely cognitive distortions. There's definitely deep embedded narratives, perception of self and other. These are all real. And the question is, how do we address them? So what I love, especially, the work that I really enjoy or I find the most value from is couples work or family work. So there we try to enter from what's today it's all been spoken about a lot is attachment. So going into the person's experience and then getting into their narrative. So first I'm going to um, enter into what the person's experiencing and the relationship with other,
Right.
and then kind of, I don't know if we want to get into the weeds now of kind of the dance that we get into other people,
Right.
and then I'll take them into, and then we'll get to their perceptions through a changed experience. So I know I'm talking more meta here, but if someone comes in, first we create safety in the room. So if it's an individual, even let's say, so there's a safety that's created between therapist and client. That's how I would go enter. And then a lot of times that experience of safety, whether it's with a therapist or with their partner, is very different. So it really starts shifting kind of a person's belief system of like, I can't trust anyone,
Right.
or no one's there for me, or so relationally, it's for me to watch it is much more powerful. Where someone will come in thinking, okay, my spouse doesn't care about me, or I am never enough, and then I take them to a space of ultimately, I'm giving you the snippet of it. Ultimately, I take them to a space of where their partner could respond to them differently in a genuine way, like they share their hurt, and the partner for the first time, when I structured this right, the partner for the first time is actually hearing them because they're not feeling attacked. I have them share it in a way of what's really going on for them, getting them in touch with their experience. So when the partner responds to them different than they have in the past, and there's a real connection there, in the technical terms, it's a corrective emotional experience. They have a new emotional experience. Then they start thinking differently about their partner. It's like, oh, 1 second, you could be there for me, or I could have this. This could be different. So that starts changing. I said this all because you were talking about cognitive. Often I like to enter. Sometimes I do enter through cognitive. I see someone's
Right.
really if the belief system is really strong and that I need to enter from there. But often I like to come from their felt experience, from their emotional experience, where they're feeling, and then that will affect or then will address the beliefs.
Right, right, and that's a very powerful idea to enter, I guess, through through attachment and creating that space where the person feels safe, and then from there, so you attach to the system, and then from there, you're able to make the emotional correction. Um, Going to a little bit to another topic, and I think that
I'll say one last point. Sorry to interject.
sure,
One last point, because we were talking right before we got on air. We were talking about the nervous system, parasympathetic system, the sympathetic system.
just gonna go there.
So, oh, okay.
I know, go, perfect.
That's an alignment. So often people come in and like they say, okay, they'll present like, hey, this is an issue. Like, how do I fix it?
Right,
Or people come in and they're in a lot of dysregulation or there's a lot going on, and it's like, just get me out of it. So for any change to happen, and it connects to the attachment and to this creating safety, is for anything to change, there has to be regulation. There have to be the parasympathetic system. Some therapists, some models, they call it, being in red brain or green brain or yellow brain. So if someone's in red brain, if they're in fight or flight, if someone, let's say it happens with a couple, right? They're in my room and they're fight or flight, they're triggered, they're yelling at each other, there's a lot of angst. Can I start challenging thoughts or start giving insight or reframing, right? There's a lot of charge here. The system is in threat.
right,
So you definitely want to tone it down when people are calm, when they feel safe, when they feel connected either to a therapist or their partner, when we get people regulated, then we could start addressing the underlying experiences, whether
right,
thoughts, feelings, behaviors.
right. So taking them from a sympathetic state to a parasympathetic state. It's interesting because, like, in our culture or in our community, from an individualistic level, a lot of the things that we do in Yiddishkeit is sort of expressed, or it manifests more in the sympathetic state. Like, we have a culture of doing, of pushing through, like pushing through in life and getting things done. And I guess the call is a call of action. In a certain way, we're going into a state of like we're creating a high dopamine rush, and we're getting ourselves ready, like in a certain way, for fight or flight, to accomplish what we want to accomplish in work, or in our Jewish way of living, Jewish way of life, like the pressure right before Shabbos as we're going into Shabbos. But sometimes there is an important stress, or we should underscore as well that Yiddishkeit expresses itself in the parasympathetic state, in a calm state, in a serotonin evoked state, where you're calm, where you feel connected. And sort of that's what you accomplish within your couples, to bring them to a state of parasympathetic, that there can be a relationship here where both of you are calm and connected and attached and safe. And that world does exist. And we want to bring that to the forefront so they feel connected in a deeper way. So if you could elaborate a little bit just on how we live from a parasympathetic state to a sympathetic state in your experience.
I mean, are you asking that in the context of what I see in our culture? What?
Yeah, in our culture.
I think that's a whole nother topic that I don't know if we'll cover the whole thing today, but at any time I see this in our culture, I see this a lot when we're trying to do things to validate our existence. We're trying to validate our worth from external doing, right? So if I accomplish, I'll prove my worthiness, and maybe it doesn't have to be conscious, but if I do, essentially, if I do enough, then I'll prove that I matter. Then I'll prove that I'm worthy. If one is coming from that paradigm, that's painful and it's never ending, because essentially I'm coming from a place of I'm not worthy, and if I can prove that if I do enough, but it's kind of, you can't ever really fill it.
Right.
If it's coming, it's not something that can be filled from the outside. So it's always a chase of, do I do more, and always feeling empty. And that can manifest differently for different people, how that shows up. Um, so we probably have to break it down further. But being I mean, the work that I would do is try to help someone get rooted back in self, where their behaviors are not coming as trying to validate who they are, but that expression of who they are. It's coming to me now. Maybe I'm jumping ahead, but I've shared this with friends, or maybe in another podcast I did a while ago. It hit me once, and maybe I heard it from someone, but I don't remember. But the whole paradigm, Foss, you mentioned our culture as Lubavitchers. Take the biggest thing, bringing Mashiach, right? Our whole job is Dir B'Tachtonim, bringing Mashiach, Mivtzoyim, bringing everybody, bringing the world to its elevated, most perfected state. So to me, thinking about it, this is my position, it can come from a place of unworthiness, or I'm in a sympathetic, you want to put it into the sympathetic or parasympathetic uh, paradigm. So if I bring Mashiach, if I do Mivtzoyim, or if I do enough, then I'm good. Then I'll be worthy. But Mashiach's not here yet, and I always have to do more, and so then I can't be. I'm not worthy because it's dependent on the results that I provide, and if I did X, then I'm good enough. Whereas where I see it, even in the Rebbe's Torah or Kol Hashvin Chavivin, it's not because you did, not because you're inherently a Shvi. You're inherently, it's you, who you are is powerful. Therefore, go bring Mashiach. So I would say like this: is it because if I bring Mashiach, then I prove my worthiness, or because I'm so worthy, go out there and bring Mashiach? Because I'm so worthy, go out there and share that. Do Mivtayim, and that
Right.
comes from a whole different.
Right.
It's a whole different setup. So I'm
Right.
going out there because I'm full. I know who I am. I'm rooted in my values. I'm rooted in self. And then I'm going to spill over. I'm going to share that because that's my calling. I'm going to share who that is. I'm going to share that with the world and bring the world into that space. But if it's outward focused, meaning if I'm running and saying like, I'm not rooted. I don't really know my value, or I don't feel valued, because often, I mean, it could happen from a million places where a person doesn't feel valued. It could be early childhood experiences. It could be the culture. It could be even social media, right? We're trying to match up. So I don't feel inherently good. So then I'm trying to feel it from the outside. And that's causes a lot of stress, causes a lot of turmoil, inner turmoil. And that's the crux of a lot of people suffering.
Right.
Right.
And it's interesting because this topic that you brought up of worthiness, self-identity, worthiness is something that comes up so much. First of all, with in our circles and even outside of our circles, like who we are, what's our worth. And I often like to tell clients, don't mortgage yourself to motivate yourself to do something. Don't mortgage your whole existence to motivate yourself to do something. Use something else to motivate yourself, not your core worthiness. And I just want to tie into what you mentioned about Shvi and Chavivin, because it's one of my favorite topics. There's a story about a Satmar Chassid who came to the Rebbe for Yechidus, for a bracha, and the Rebbe asked him, what are they talking about in Satmar? What's the Satmar Rebbe speaking about? What is he bragging about? So the Chassid said, the Satmar Rebbe quoted a Gemara, Afilu Peish Yisrael, Malay Mitzvahs Kiriman, that even sinners, even the sinners of the Jewish people, are filled with mitzvahs, are filled with good deeds, like a pomegranate. And the Satmar Rebbe asked, how is it possible that a Jew who is a Peish Yisrael, who's a sinner, how is he filled with mitzvahs? That's what the Satmar Rebbe asked. The Rebbe turned to this Satmar Chassid and said, I learned the Gemara, and I also had a question. But my question was the exact opposite. If Jews are filled with mitzvahs and good deeds, then how is it possible that they are sinners? And I thought about that story. It was published in a book recently, because there's a Gemara. The Gemara is talking about someone who has actions about themselves that contradict each other. And it's not a joke. This person is doing things that he will be called a sinner. At the same time, he also is doing things that puts him on the map of good deeds. And he is filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate. And the question is, what are we focusing on? And the Rebbe's approach is that the person is worthy. The person has something just by being born and just going through his day-to-day life. He's probably doing good deeds. And just by being, he's already filled with good deeds. And that's a very important component to what you mentioned. Where does worthiness come from? And how do
and
I
what are you
do
identifying? And what are you identifying with?
Right.
Right? Because here, I'm identifying as the parts that Averis, or I'm identifying with my issues, or identifying with my my flaws, and that's my identity. So then it's like, whether you call it in that Gemara, whether it's Paish Yisrael, you talk about if person looking at himself, I'm a flawed person, or am I identifying that as my inherent value as a human, as a yid, as there should be, wherever you're in, whatever your story is, and then you're human, right? And then we deal with our humanity, and we honor it, and then do what we need to do as a human to live as our higher selves. But what's the narrative? What's the voice that's running my life? Where am I living from? Am I living from a place of, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, and I have to fill that in from the outside? Or is my story, I am valued, I am good enough, and I'm going to live as an expression of that, and I'll live according to my values. And I know that we have had this discussion. A lot of the work is getting people reconnected with their values,
Right.
And getting people, and a lot of when you talk about cognitive or narrative, getting people very, to examine their narratives of where we're being driven from. We're being driven from our stories of, want to call it the critical voice, the inner critic, the parts of ourselves that are running our lives, they're putting us down, or saying we're not valued. So a lot of that conversation could be unpacked in therapy as well.
Right. And, because we have, or, we're working with religious people, from people, we have a lot of belief systems that work for us. And sometimes, I guess, the duggish, the stress, we may be doing wrong and causing some havoc into our emotional state, or into our cognitive state, into our behavioral state, and then coming back to, okay, what are those phrases or sayings or ideas? Let's re-examine them and see them. And that's why, in a way, being with the background that we have, and understanding our community with the sayings from Torah, or the beliefs of Torah mitzvahs, and then now using the tool of therapy to see how that's actually working for you or against you. So something we actually discussed, another great topic is, and I'll just bring it here. We actually spoke about this last week. And it's a very interesting saying from the Mittler Rebbe to a chassid who would teach chassidus, and then I guess at some point in his going around and teaching chassidus, he felt yeshus. He felt his ego, like, here is this hotshot speaking, and he's getting, I guess he's getting validation, but more than validation, it's feeding his ego. So he went back to the Mittler Rebbe and he said, I don't think teaching chassidus is good for me, because it's inflating my ego. So the Mittler Rebbe said to that, as a answer to that problem, the Mittler Rebbe said, an onion you should be, but chassidus you should still say. So I want to just explore this a little bit with you. What do you think about that saying?
So I meant right. So it came up a few times recently. We spoke about it. I meant to look up the story in general, like, because I don't remember. Was it that the chassid felt yeshus, or he felt because that could be the story. I also remember somehow, and I don't know, I have to ask the mumchim, was it also that he felt maybe an imposter, right? Like, I'm sharing chassidus, but I don't know if I'm doing it right, or
Hmm.
maybe my ego's involved, or maybe I'm not really doing it at the best level, or um, and that just struck another story I heard
Right.
recently of uh, uh, what was Rabbi Gorelik's, what's Rabbi Gorelik's wife's name in Italy? Mrs. Gorelik, she said also like she went to teach a class to girls,
Right. Right.
and she felt like someone else would have more to share. Like, I'm not the person for this. So it could be, I don't know the story about the Mitzvah, but what exactly, if you remember, tell me. But to me, the reframe, so I hear this and I want to hear what you're hearing from people. It seemed like that it's used like to push that narrative of you mentioned earlier. Just go, go, go. It doesn't matter your inner experience. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You do what you're told. Do chassidus, and you could say bypass your experience and just do what you're told and forget about it. Like, I don't want to hear. You want to suffer. Go suffer and do chassidus. Um
Just to jump in,
and
just to jump in right
yeah,
here. It's just funny how you said that, because a person is using it basically not to work on themselves. Just that alone. If you use it that way, so then you should be worthy, right? So it's not so important who you are, but get the job done, right? So then you should be worthy enough to get the job done. But it's interesting how people who use I mean, we do it automatically. It's part of, I guess, the way we grew up, or we fabring the message, sort of, that what you're saying is that it's not so important what you are, just get the job done. But then from the other side, you're not worthy enough, right? You're not worthy enough. That's
right.
the
I'm
message
also
we got.
thinking, right, because I'm also thinking, because talk about Judaism, it's deed over creed, or what's the lashon that's I don't know the source right now, but it says that if only they forsook me, but they accepted my Torah. So almost like this narrative of like, if you did the action, it doesn't really matter your inner experience, right? It's so that could become a very strong belief system, and it doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter. So the reframe, where I think about it, is don't identify with the parts of yourself say been the I don't know what I'm really doing it for, or oh, it's my ego. It's an empowering message of saying you're bigger than that. You think you're struggling, is it my ego? It's not you're worthy. You really, at your core, it's coming from a healthy place. Your story is telling you that maybe not, or maybe I'm not worthy enough, or maybe I'm stuck in my ego, or maybe I don't. So it's saying, you struggle, you're gonna go deal with it. You'll work on it. It's not your truth. It's actually the opposite. Don't identify with the narrative that I'm broken, or I really don't mean it. I really don't. No, don't identify with that. Go do what you have to do, and then if it's a recurring narrative and you're sitting with it, um, it has to be explored, right? Meaning,
Right,
go tap into your worthiness. But if it's a
right.
whole day, that's my perspective. Whether that's
So
that's the
actually,
way.
I loved what you said, because I was doing a little bit of research into if the Rebbe had any, I guess, ha'aris on the story, and I saw that the Rebbe mentioned that the idea of why did the Mittler Rebbe say atzibla, you should be like an onion? So it's very similar to what you just said, because so the person is struggling with self, like he's feeling he's not aligned with himself, right? So the Rebbe says you should be the Mittler Rebbe is saying, the Rebbe is explaining that the Mittler Rebbe is saying you should be an onion. What's the nature of an onion? The nature of an onion is not for the onion itself, but the nature of an onion is to place the onion in other foods, and the onion gives flavor to the other foods. So the actual way the onion was born, so to say, was to give. And therefore, the way the Rebbe is the reframe, the way the Rebbe is explaining the story, is that is the deepest identity of this person. So this person is saying I feel yeshus by sharing Chassidus, the Rebbe says your mission is to share Chassidus. Like that's the nature of who you are. Some people learn the story like, so you can learn the story like push through, but the Rebbe didn't say that. The Rebbe is saying something even, I think, even deeper, and that is underscoring the nature of who you are and embracing who you are. Be an onion and embrace being an onion because an onion flavors other foods.
Wow, no, I love that. It's even more. That's yeah, that really expresses what because I was thinking about the Tzibula part, and actually meant to like, what was the
Right.
Tzibula part? That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So you're taking your narrative, you're getting stuck, and saying I have to fight through. I'm not really worthy, and saying you are worthy. You're the Tzibula. You're there to give it. You're thinking, and you're stuck in your ego. Embrace it. This is who you are. Um, and I do think we have a lot of sayings that we can weaponize against the self because inherently they're meant. Torah is our life, so it's meant to be. And what's life? Life is invigorating, passionate. So if it's not taught that way, usually it's because it's like similar to what they say about Torah and science, right? Can Torah and science coexist? They have to, because if Torah is true, and so either the science is not up to date, or you misunderstood the Torah. It has one or the other. So, so if you have a saying in Torah that's saying, "No, I'm supposed to stay stuck," I'm supposed to not, I'm supposed to feel unworthy, then perhaps it needs to be, and that's informing my life. Perhaps that needs to be looked at because it's probably leaking into other places as well in my relationships, with whether it's a spouse, my children, or otherwise.
Yeah, so just going back to there, to Atzibala as also from their veteran, I think that's also an escape for people to say that you don't have to do the inner work or you don't have to work on yourself. I guess this is a mantra very much in Darashvi or in the world we live in, is you don't have to be working on yourself too much. And in a way, working on yourself may even be self-centered. So Atzibala is all from their veteran. Like escaping your inner work, Mashana Teva.
Almost like be bitter. Sibla,
Yeah,
we take Sibla, be onion, but it doesn't mean be bitter, but almost like that's the way it's understood. Be bitter,
yeah,
but
exactly.
do what you have to do.
And that's the way when it was said by Fabrengens growing up, that's the way I took it. That it
I
doesn't,
understood it that way too.
yeah, like, a person who has bad breath, you know what I mean? Just have bad breath like an onion. But Chassidus, you should say. Like, it doesn't matter who you are. And there's sort of this memo, and obviously I could have taken it wrong. There's sort of this memo of like, it's okay not to be a kind person or to be an achzar or to be self-centered or to be selfish. It's okay because Atzibah is all from their ver. So that, which actually leads me to another saying, which I bring into sessions recently, and that is derech eretz kadma laTorah. That's something that we spoke about recently. Derech eretz kadma laTorah, that before we grow in Torah or alongside of it, we're working on ourselves. We're working on our derech eretz. We're working on how we're going to be kinder, how we're going to be calmer, how we're going to be an adult, take responsibility, how we're going to forgive, how we're going to have more compassion. Derech eretz, kodma laTorah. And there was a quote you said recently about, the feet to enter. So if you could elaborate a little bit on the feet to enter, which very much connects to derech eretz kodma laTorah.
I don't remember exactly what you're referring to. I remember joking that it's almost like you should need, like you should, when you come in to be, super religious or super involved, you have to have a certificate and saying like, are you showing up in your life as a human being? Are you being, you know, are you being, are you doing the dishes? Taking the story of the Rebbe Matzah Shabbos. Are you showing up as a healthy husband, as a father, as who you are? And now you're like, yeah, this is really real to me, and I'm getting deeper in my Yiddishkeit or is the Yiddishkeit a cover story, right? It's like,
Right.
no, I you know, they say the joke about Avram is like Yaakov, established Ma'ariv, and the accepted joke is, if you also had 12 kids at home, you would also
Right.
establish Ma'ariv, right? Like,
Right.
and that, even saying that as a jest, the narrative is like, I'm going to use my Yiddishkeit to run away. It's an excuse to get out.
Right.
Um, if that's the Yiddishkeit, that it's Chatmal Torah. Meaning, of course, you should go to Ma'ariv because you're from here. You take Ma'ariv, and the byproduct could be also, look, you also had some space. You also had, that's beautiful. It's fine. But it's really what's the perspective, right? And sometimes this is unconscious. Like someone saying, no, I'm very from, from Vemen's Cheshbon, we would say,
Right.
oh, it's great. It's a great
Right.
story. So that takes honesty and self-reflection, and doesn't mean that you should diminish the frumkeit. It means get aligned with it, right? It should be an expression of, and we spoke about that. Doesn't mean, oh, so don't do Torah until you're a mensch. No, Torah is supposed to, it informs you how to be a mensch. But
Right.
don't, those parts of Torah, don't put them on the side. You know, having shalom bayis, showing up as a person that's good midos. We spoke about often this quote of that Chassidus was established l'shanos teva midosav. That's what you mentioned, like showing up to challenge our harsher habits or our harsher behaviors, and to transform them. So whether that's with a mashpia and through chassidus, and you're really doing, and you're challenging your sharper edges that showed up over your life because of different experiences, and that's one way to do it. And another way to do it is if that hasn't panned out, is through therapy. If they have a Seilach Harav, do that. And if that's not addressing your underlying, the way you show up, whether it's overt in negative behaviors or negative communication or destructive relational habits, or more internal, more subtle, that it's you're not showing up the way you want to show up even internally, or you're being plagued by something, or you could level up. It's a good space to do that if you have the right container and the right therapist and the right, you should find someone that's comes recommended and that has the same values as you. That's a space to do that. So to come full circle, you're saying we have you could definitely use religion as an excuse to not show up as a mensch, as not show up. But again, that's distorting Torah, and we try to reframe it to have an aligned with at least the way we see it is Kayim
Right.
Chayenu, the Daf Gabai, and to really be aligned with its purpose of showing up as a powerful person, and as an expression of that, showing up powerfully and strongly in your life, in your relationships, and day-to-day living.
Kussi, I think this was a great topic as our first podcast, and the Mirza Shem to many more. And thanks for making the time to get on. We had such a good conversation, and I'm sure people are going to love it.
Absolutely. Thanks for actually making it happen, because we have great conversations, I started saying. So it's great to be doing this. Thank you, Yossi.
Yeah.